You know, I've spent decades studying successful people, and I've discovered something that might surprise you. The difference between someone who builds real wealth and someone who struggles financially their entire life has almost nothing to do with education, background, or even intelligence. It has everything to do with how they think. Let me ask you a question that I want you to really consider. What would happen if you woke up tomorrow with the exact same mind as a millionaire? Not their money, not their connections, just their way of thinking. Would your life change? I can tell you with absolute certainty that it would, and probably within a matter of months. I remember meeting a man many years ago who was working as a janitor in a downtown office building. His name was William, and he had immigrated to this country with nothing but the clothes on his back and $17 in his pocket. 20 years later, this same man owned 3 apartment buildings and had accumulated more wealth than most college-educated professionals I knew. When I asked him his secret, he said something I'll never forget. "Mr. Nightingale, I simply decided to think differently than the people around me. While they complained about their wages, I studied wealthy people. While they spent money on things that depreciated, I bought things that appreciated. The money followed the thinking, not the other way around." That conversation changed how I understood wealth forever. You see, most people have it backwards. They believe that when they get money, they'll start thinking like wealthy people. But that's not how it works. You must first think like a wealthy person, and the wealth will follow as naturally as night follows day. Today, I'm going to share with you the blueprint for thinking like a millionaire. These aren't theories or abstract concepts. These are the actual mental patterns, habits, and philosophies that separate those who build lasting wealth from those who never quite get there. And I promise you this, if you can master these ways of thinking, your financial future will transform in ways you cannot yet imagine. The ancient Roman philosopher Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." True wealth begins in the mind, and that's exactly where we're going to start building yours. Let me tell you about 2 men I knew early in my career, both working at the same company, earning the same salary, living in the same neighborhood. Their names were Robert and James, and watching their lives unfold taught me more about the millionaire mindset than any book ever could. Robert was what you might call conventionally smart. He followed all the rules, showed up on time, did his work diligently. When he got his paycheck, he'd pay his bills, buy what he needed, and maybe put a little aside if there was anything left over. He believed in job security, in climbing the corporate ladder one rung at a time. He was a good man, a decent man, but he thought like an employee. 20 years later, Robert was still working at that same company, still living paycheck to paycheck, still waiting for his big break. James, on the other hand, thought differently from day one. He saw that same paycheck not as his income, but as his seed money. While Robert bought a new car to impress his neighbors, James bought his first car for $300 and drove it for 5 years. While Robert ate lunch out every day, James brought sandwiches from home. But here's what made James different. He wasn't being cheap. He was being strategic. James had read somewhere that wealthy people make their money work for them, so that's exactly what he did. He took every dollar he could save and invested it. At first, he bought a small duplex, lived in one unit, and rented out the other. The rent paid his mortgage. Within 3 years, he bought another property, then another. He studied real estate in his spare time the way other men studied sports scores. He read books about investing, about compound interest, about tax laws that favor investors over employees. But here's the fascinating part. James didn't think of himself as sacrificing. He told me once, "Earl, when Robert buys a new car, he gets temporary pleasure and permanent debt. When I buy a property, I get temporary discomfort and permanent income. I'm not denying myself. I'm just delaying gratification for multiplication." 10 years into their careers, Robert earned $50,000 a year. James earned $50,000 a year from his job, plus another $40,000 from his rental properties. 15 years in, James quit his job entirely. His properties generated over $100,000 annually, and he spent his time finding more opportunities. Robert, meanwhile, was still hoping for a promotion. Now, I'm not telling you this story to make Robert look foolish. Robert represents most people in our society. Good, hardworking people who simply never learn to think like wealth builders. The tragedy isn't that Robert worked hard. The tragedy is that he worked hard with an employee mindset instead of an investor mindset. This reminds me of something Andrew Carnegie once observed. He noticed that most people see money as something to be spent, while wealthy people see money as something to be multiplied. Carnegie said, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced, not because having wealth is wrong, but because the purpose of building wealth is to create value, opportunity, and security, not just for yourself, but for others." James understood this principle instinctively. By the time he was 50, he owned 17 properties and employed 12 people to manage them. He created jobs, provided housing, and built genuine financial security for his family. Robert, working just as hard, created none of these things because his thinking never evolved beyond trading time for money. The difference wasn't talent. It wasn't luck. It wasn't even opportunity. They both had the same opportunities. The difference was entirely in how they thought about money, about investing, about the future. James thought like a millionaire long before he became one, and that made all the difference. So what exactly does it mean to think like a millionaire? Let me break this down into the fundamental principles that govern wealth creation, principles I've observed again and again in successful people throughout my career. First, understand this essential truth: wealthy people think in terms of assets, not income. Most people ask, "How much money do I make?" Millionaires ask, "How much money does my money make?" This is the foundation of everything else. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. It sounds simple, but most people spend their lives accumulating liabilities while thinking they're building wealth. Your personal residence, for instance, is not an asset in the truest sense. It costs you money every month in mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. A rental property that generates positive cash flow, on the other hand, is a genuine asset. The wealthy focus relentlessly on acquiring assets and minimize liabilities. They understand that freedom comes not from a high salary, but from passive income that exceeds your expenses. Here's a statement I want you to remember. Your income determines your lifestyle, but your assets determine your freedom. You can make $100,000 a year and be broke if you spend $110,000. Or you can make $50,000 a year and become wealthy if you invest $20,000 of it wisely year after year. The millionaire thinks long term. They sacrifice temporary comfort for permanent security. The second principle is this: millionaires invest in themselves first. Before they invest in stocks, real estate, or businesses, they invest in their own knowledge and skills. They read voraciously. They attend seminars. They seek mentors. They understand that the greatest asset they'll ever own is their own mind, and they treat it accordingly. A wealthy person knows that an investment in education yields the highest returns. I once calculated that spending just 30 minutes a day studying your field, truly studying it, not just casually reading, amounts to over 180 hours per year. That's equivalent to more than 4 full-time work weeks of education annually. Do that for 5 years, and you've gained the equivalent of almost half a year of full-time education. While your competition watches television, you're building expertise that translates directly into earning power. Third, and this is crucial, millionaires understand the power of compound interest and compound effort. Einstein allegedly called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world, saying, "He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." The wealthy harness this power. They know that a small amount invested consistently over time becomes a fortune. They start early, they stay consistent, and they never interrupt the compounding process. But it's not just about money compounding. It's about effort compounding. Every skill you develop builds on previous skills. Every relationship you nurture opens new doors. Every good decision makes the next good decision easier. Millionaires think in terms of momentum. They know that success breeds success, and they're patient enough to let that momentum build over years and decades. Fourth, wealthy people embrace calculated risks while others seek security. Notice I said calculated risks, not reckless gambles. The millionaire mindset understands that the greatest risk is taking no risk at all. Staying in a comfortable job that leads nowhere is a risk. Failing to invest because you might lose money is a risk. Playing it safe is often the most dangerous strategy of all, because it guarantees you'll never break free from financial mediocrity. The wealthy ask different questions. Instead of, what if it fails? They ask, what if it succeeds? Instead of, what could I lose? They ask, what could I gain? Instead of, is this guaranteed? They ask, this is probable. This shift in questioning transforms how you see opportunities. Let me give you one more principle that separates millionaire thinking from poverty. Thinking wealthy people solve problems, while poor people complain about them. Every millionaire I've studied built their wealth by identifying a problem and solving it better than anyone else. They see problems as opportunities in disguise. When others say, this is impossible, millionaires say, how can this be done? Remember this? The size of your financial success is directly proportional to the size of the problems you solve. If you solve small problems for a few people, you'll earn a modest income. If you solve big problems for many people, you'll build significant wealth. This is why entrepreneurs and investors typically accumulate more wealth than employees. They're positioned to solve larger problems and capture more of the value they create. Now, how do you apply these principles in today's world? How do you start thinking like a millionaire right now, regardless of your current financial situation? Start with this simple exercise: audit your current spending and thinking. For the next 30 days, categorize every dollar you spend as either an investment or an expense. An investment moves you closer to financial freedom. An expense moves you further away. That education course, investment. That streaming service you rarely use, expense. That business book, investment. That daily coffee shop habit, probably an expense unless you're networking there. The millionaire mindset doesn't mean never enjoying life. It means being intentional. When you buy something expensive, ask yourself, is this an asset or a liability? Will this appreciate or depreciate? Am I buying this because I genuinely value it, or because I'm trying to impress others? Millionaires spend money on things that matter to them and ruthlessly cut spending on things that don't. In your career, start thinking like an owner, not an employee, even if you work for someone else. How can you add more value? How can you develop skills that multiply your earning power? In today's economy, the most valuable people are those who can solve complex problems, lead others, or create systems that generate results. These skills are learnable, but you must invest the time. Consider technology and modern investment opportunities. Today, you can start investing with as little as $50 through apps and platforms that didn't exist when I started my career. You can educate yourself for free through podcasts, YouTube videos, and online courses. You can start a side business from your laptop. The barriers to building wealth have never been lower, but you must have the mindset to seize these opportunities. Here's a practical challenge: commit to investing at least 20% of your income before you pay anything else. If that sounds impossible, start with 10%. If that's still too much, start with 5%. The amount matters less than the habit. You're training yourself to think like an investor, to pay yourself first, to prioritize your financial future over immediate gratification. As your income grows, increase that percentage. This simple habit alone will put you ahead of 90% of people. Another modern application: build multiple streams of income. The average millionaire has 7 different income sources. You might have your job, a rental property, some dividend-paying stocks, a side consulting practice, and a small online business. Each stream doesn't need to be large. Together they create resilience and accelerate wealth building. Start with one additional stream beyond your job, master it, then add another. As we come to the end of our time together today, I want you to understand something profound. Thinking like a millionaire is not about being greedy. It's about being responsible. It's about creating security for your family, options for your life, and the ability to contribute meaningfully to others. The blueprint I've shared with you today: thinking in assets, investing in yourself, harnessing compound growth, taking calculated risks, and solving problems. These aren't secrets. They're simply principles that most people never learn or never apply consistently enough to see results. Your financial future isn't determined by the economy, by your background, or by luck. It's determined by your thinking. Change your thinking, and you will change your life. It's as simple and as challenging as that. I challenge you to start today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Take one principle from this lesson and implement it immediately. Open that investment account. Buy that educational course. Start tracking your expenses. Have that difficult conversation about your career trajectory. The journey to wealth, like any journey, begins with a single step. Remember what James taught me all those years ago. You're not sacrificing when you delay gratification for multiplication. You're simply thinking longer term than those around you. And that long-term thinking is the very essence of wealth creation. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and philosopher, wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The same is true for wealth. It begins within you, in your way of thinking. Think like a millionaire, and you will become one. Not overnight, not without effort, but inevitably, as surely as the sun rises each morning. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Now go out there and put these principles into action. Your future self will thank you for the thoughts you think and the actions you take today.